Welcome to our first study looking at God's protection and healing. I've been asked by several people over the past couple of days what my thoughts were on this coronavirus pandemic and God's protection and healing and so on. So I thought I'd put down into a few small videos, each one about 5 or 10 minutes. We'll go through looking at Psalm 91, looking at God's protection, healing, and God's provision throughout difficult times. So if you have a Bible, please just open it to Psalm 91 and read with me verse 1. It says, "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." What a wonderful place to start this series of studies. You know, it says, "He who dwells in the shadow of the Almighty." He who dwells. That means that we have to live. You know, to dwell. I'm using the King James, so there may be some rather archaic language to some people if you're not familiar with the King James Bible. But it means to dwell, to live, not just to visit occasionally. The old word for where you live was a dwelling place. And so I'm in my home now, in my study, my dwelling place. This is where all the work of the ministry comes together with the computer and all the study books you can see behind me. And this is where all of the sermons and the teaching and things like that happen for Meeting with Miracles. He who dwells in the secret place. You know, I'm reminded, particularly now as we're coming up to the Easter period of the Passover. And at Passover, you know, the Israelites had to sacrifice a lamb and place the blood of the lamb on the doorposts. And then they had to enter in to the dwelling place for the protection of God. You see, the angel of death was about to pass over that night, and the firstborn of everybody in Egypt, and even the firstborn of the cattle, would be killed during the night by this angel of death. Now, blood in the Bible very often signifies death, and we see that the death of the lamb was the substitute. And so when the angel of death passed over, he saw the blood on the doorposts of the dwellings and passed over, meaning that the firstborn would be safe and protected in that dwelling. So we can see very clearly just from the first couple of words of this psalm how important it is to obey the words of God. I don't know if you've ever thought about why God asked for blood to be put on the doorposts. It's the first time in the Bible that we see anything like this happen. But it wasn't the first time that it happened in history. In some ancient cultures in Phoenicia and Sumeria, it was quite common when people felt under threat to sacrifice an animal to one of their deities, and then they would take the blood of this sacrificed animal and put it on the doorposts of their own homes. And what this would do, this would signify to any evil spirits or anybody who would come to try and do them harm, that a sacrifice had been offered to a deity for protection. And so anything or anybody trying to come into the dwelling place where the blood was, they would come and something bad would happen to them. So understanding that this was quite an ancient practice, and certainly the Egyptians being a very superstitious people, imagine seeing the blood not just on one doorpost, but on tens of thousands of doorposts in Egypt. You see, the Bible tells us that 600,000 men, plus women and children, made the Exodus. Some Bible scholars estimate it could be as many as 2 million people made the Exodus. Now, I don't know how many homes there were, but it would take tens of thousands, a few 100,000 homes for 2 million people to live in. So let's just say, for argument's sake, there was 250,000 homes, Israelite homes, that had blood on the doorposts. Every single Egyptian walking around that evening seeing the blood would have some concern. They would understand what blood meant on a doorpost. They would think that these Israelites have made a sacrifice to their God because something bad was coming, and that sacrifice would stave off the wrath of their God. And so millions and millions of Egyptians at this time, seeing the blood on the doorposts of every Israelite home, would be very concerned. They would be worried. They would think, what's happening? Why don't we know about this? So it's important sometimes to see the background and the culture and the history, the archaeology that's behind the Bible, because it gives us a greater insight into the book that we are reading. So he that dwells in the secret place. Now it's interesting, it says a secret place. Now that's not a secret from us, it's a secret for us. When our kids were smaller, when they were very young, my wife and I, we would have Easter egg hunts, and we would hide eggs around the house and draw little pictures, and they would move around the house trying to find these Easter eggs that were hidden. You see, they weren't hidden from them, they were hidden for them. And when we're in the secret place of God, that's a place that's hidden for us, a place of refuge, a place that we can go into to receive security, to receive rest, to receive healing, to receive restoration from God. So when we dwell in the secret place, we're abiding under the shadow of the Almighty, under the shadow. This talks again about protection. Outside, it's quite a warm day. I haven't ventured out this afternoon, but looking through the window, I've seen many people out in t-shirts, just enjoying the heat of the sun. But when it gets too hot, you need shade, you need shadow, and that speaks again about protection. So we have the protection of God in this very first verse of Psalm 91. I'm just going to leave it there for now, and a little bit later we'll come back and start looking at verse 2.